Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists.
Welcome back to the podcast, Douglas. It's nice to see you, even though our video seems to be frozen again, but that's fine. We'll just
okay.
I don't need to see you. I know what you look like.
You sure do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
A couple, three times. Yeah, you handsome fella.
Oh,
handsome fella. Don't denigrate yourself like that.
Well, what's going on with you? I know you got a big show coming up.
Do I? Is that what's happening? I saw on your show notes you were like, do you ever cancel a show because the setup is so unpleasant?
Not cancel,
did you
but just choose not to do it.
Yeah, just not even apply. And I'm like, did you say that because I'm getting ready to go to Houston? It's no secret that is one of the most unpleasant setups and breakdowns in the country. So I don't mind being loud and proud about that. I think they know what they have on their hands. It's always a challenge. How about that?
It's a dance, as one would say.
Yeah,
it's a dance nightmare.
It's a dance at gunpoint. It's like a prison dance.
Well, I'd really like to have a show right now. That's true. From my notes I wrote, I couldn't apply to this show this year because of how hard it is for me and how hard shows have been for me. And I had to kind of make some decisions with a couple other shows moving forward. As I'm getting older and having issues, I kind of have to take that into account, whether I can apply or not.
Well, you're an early to bed kind of fella. And, you've said that before. You kind of get into that habit, especially in the hot summer months when you have to get up early when the weather strikes you in order to work before it gets too hot. So, I mean, I know that you're an early to bed kind of guy. If I texted you when I'm setting up by you, I'd be hitting you squarely at bedtime because it's going to be a late one.
Yeah, I'm not that sensitive with sleep. I would certainly give up a little bit of sleep to do a good show, but physically just having a tighter window of time is what really gets me, that I can't get it done in time. I really need a day before the show setup, not a few hours of the day before to set up. So Anyway.
Yeah, I'm bringing a painting this time around that I have not shown since, actually I haven't shown it in over a year, but I've got a big double booth and I've got a wall to fill and I've got a gigantic 100-pound plus 9-foot by 6-foot painting. It's that one that I showed that show there in Utah.
That's cool. I hadn't seen it, and I was wondering if it had sold or if it was just waiting for the right opportunity to come back out and make a resurgence.
Yeah. It's what happened is that my truck is no longer reliable and I'm not taking it out this time. And so I rented a high van and I've got room. I'd have to take a trailer in order to show that piece because it doesn't fit inside my truck, but with the high roof van that I rented, it fits in there. So she gets to make another appearance. So I'm excited to show that again.
It's a great market. That's the other thing that was hard for me is like, it's such a great show and a great market for me. I hate to, leave that one on the table.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are you done for the season or you still have La Quinta?
I've got one more show in November. Yeah, we're going to La Quinta.
Nice.
I'm looking forward to that, but it feels so far away at this point. It's kind of been like, we've been working every day. It doesn't feel like the kind of pace that we've been having for the whole summer. It's been a little lackadaisical around the Sigworth household. It's been rest and relaxation.
That's good. Yeah, you texted me and said, "Yeah, I'll be ready to record around noon." I'm like, noon? Wow. Look at you. Taking a half day.
Short studio days these days, but we're getting done what we have to get done.
Yeah, it's like you did talk to Keith Grace coming up here about needing that drive, needing that deadline, and it's funny. I was sitting there listening to your talk with him and how many of the things. I'm glad you talked to him instead of me, not because I don't love him, because I do love Keith and Sherry, but so many of the questions that he answered, I'm like, that's my answer. If you were interviewing me, like I didn't realize that our histories were so remarkably similar with the illustration background and design house and working for a paper and spot illustrations, all that stuff. So really interesting stuff. Because I was sitting there going, I was like answering for him while I was listening to the show. I'm like, no, Douglas, you don't understand. It's because they needed those USA Today infographics. That's what they needed. They wanted that,
right.
that tight graphs.
You would have been like, okay, and then move on. I mean, I
Yeah,
need an explanation. I needed a little
exactly.
more information to know what he was talking about.
Yep, answer
So,
for me. So yeah, interesting talk for everybody but me who already knew the answers.
hey, there's a new acronym out there. We all know about NFTs, but I now have a new one. It's called NFPs.
What you got for NFPs?
That's for when I'm talking with friends at the art show and we're having a good old time chatting, and they turn to me and they say, you know, that's not for the podcast.
Yeah. I've had people say that to me, and it totally ends up in the podcast. I just take their name out of it. I'm like, bullshit, you're in there. Sorry. The characters represented, once again, are purely the figments of our own imaginations.
There you go. We made it all up.
That's right. That's right.
So, yeah, so there are some of our conversations lately. I've been having to figure out a way to bring up the story without being too specific.
That's right. Well, you talk about this being tail end of art show season, but it's the beginning of baseball playoff season to me.
Oh,
so
yes.
that is honestly one of the most exciting baseball games I've ever seen in my life last night.
Really?
Which inadvertent screaming was happening around the Armstrong household. Wives, children, dogs, all were a little terrified.
Thinking you were losing your mind in the other room?
Yeah, literally something happened that had never happened before, or like a outfield assist double play to end the game. It just blew my mind, like a robbing of a home run catch. And so I've got that. I won't bore you. It's not a sports podcast, but I am very wrapped up in the fact that Douglas is not means that the only sports team endorsed by the Independent Artist Podcast is the Atlanta Braves. So
that's your team, right? That's your team?
I'm die hard. I care far too much about that. And
you're wearing a ball cap today, so I can't really Atlanta Braves, I see that now. But I can't really tell if you've lost any hair through the process of all of this tortured on the edge of your seat.
I've lost so much hair. Yeah. But luckily just from the sides, from pulling it out of the side of my head this week.
All right. You know, this is going to be airing next week, so hopefully your team is still in it by the time this airs.
But it's funny. I took a little heat from a friend here online. They sent me a message. They took umbrage with the fact that I disparaged the entire great state of Indiana. I took a little heat from that with some friends. While I don't back down off of that, I think I will add one more city if I can, and it's not an Indiana city, and just being an Atlanta Braves fan, the entire city of Philadelphia, they can also, we'll add them to the list of people I don't like.
They can also suck it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You go down with your fighting Phils. You gotta go down on that one. So, man, am I not a fan currently.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
until maybe Rittenhouse Square opens, and then I'll be like, hey, I love you, Philly. It's such a nice place to be.
Take me back.
Brotherly love, baby. Get back to brotherly love. What else we got here?
Speaking of sucking it,
you know,
I've heard a lot of artists say that.
Is this another glass-blowing term?
That is not, actually. It's one of the few non-disgusting glass-blowing terms, or disgusting glass-blowing terms that doesn't exist. But, I've heard a lot of artists say that they can't sell art in an election year. So we're on the heels of all of this political stuff every day, and we're going into an election year next year. Do you find that to be true for you?
I don't believe it. I don't know what causes it. And I mean, I've had down shows, but I don't really like to place blame or excuses necessarily. I don't really pay close enough attention. I mean, I know that the world is in a horror show right now with Israel. And I mean, our own country is in turmoil. We don't even have a Speaker of the House to vote on giving aid to one spot or another. I mean, it's a horror show right now, not to talk about politics, but yeah. What do you think?
Those things can really turn into self-fulfilling prophecies. I just try and operate with a positive attitude with most things that we do in life, and with our business and our family and all that stuff, because if we start focusing on like everything being bad, you show up in the next show and you can make that happen. You can create it. You can be in the mindset that the bad shit that's going on everywhere is going to affect your ability to connect with people.
Right. Yeah. And I tried to look more inward a lot of times, but I can catch myself spiraling if other people I see are selling, and I'm like, what is the reason, as opposed to what's the excuse? Like, why am I not? But man, yeah, it does get tempting, and I do have a tendency to spiral, but I don't love blaming that election year. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. Talk to me again in a few months.
I even find myself getting a little annoyed when people get too dark, other artists are in my orbit. I find that I struggle sometimes to gracefully change the subject or send people on their way, but really don't bring your negative cloud around me, because when I'm at a show, I really am about making sales, making connections. And I don't want to bring down the energy in the booth. I don't want to bring down the energy of myself. And so, anyway, I mean, that's just my whole philosophy on why we're even there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I am Will, and I am a character that I play at the art show, and I'm in character, and that character is loaded and getting richer all the time. It may not be the case, folks. That is certainly not the case. But man, I know what you mean. I've been accused more of being less subtle and just pointing out, get out, just take it out. Don't talk about that.
Totally.
Shouldn't talk about that.
We recorded the preamble last episode with the Whitcombs before the interview was recorded. So, we didn't get to really talk much about their talk. And it really generated a lot of great conversation online and a great engagement. And it was really good conversation you guys had.
Yeah, I love those guys. And nice to give them a voice, too, because I think highly of them and the way their work has progressed, and a lot of people may not know them or get a chance to, or you have a preconceived notion because they're so goddamn pretty is why.
It's all about the pretty.
Just so goddamn pretty. No, I'm just kidding. It's not really, actually. But no, it's just, you do have preconceived notions. Oh, this person is just that. Oh, they're just doing this. And I love the choice of a certain kind of integrity of pages, photographs, and the plates that she uses, and just doing one image. I think that's a really tough road to hoe. And
that's really bold and brave to go down that road.
Scary, too. I mean, you have to have a certain kind of confidence that in order to pull that off. And who knows? I mean, I'm sure she reserves the right to change her mind down the road, but that's part of her artist statement right now. I mean, it's amazing.
One of the things I really loved about your conversation was like how they kind of seem like they come from a similar world in, their approach with the work.
Right.
And how it is in the respect of like they both are honoring techniques from the past with mixed found objects from, the past, and her technique of going back in time and using old technology to capture imagery.
Yeah, it's almost like she's taken a piece out of his booth and started making her own statements and artwork out of it. It's pretty incredible. And toxic, too. We didn't talk about the toxicity of that, and that would be an interesting topic to maybe do a panel on at some point if you are down. But talking about, I mean, everything from, the toxicity of cadmium paints to the incredible chemicals that Paige has to use to the things that you guys have to deal with glass, and
silica,
all sorts of chemicals involved in creating beautiful things that we do.
The thing that I wanted to say about that was I found it so interesting that their collectors aren't the same. I mean, you would think it kind of, as an outsider, it would seem like they would, but it's such a nuance that I never really even thought about until that you guys talked about it. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see which pieces hang in different homes and whose artwork that you see in different homes where you go through, and and a lot of times it is not the people that you consider your competition, really. It's things that look good in people's homes, whether I walk in and I can't tell you how many different times I've walked in and seen a Mark Lewinsky on the wall. And like, that guy, and I always see that guy at shows and I'm like, there's my guy. I'm going to do well this weekend if that guy's here. It's like a good luck symbol almost.
Okay. And that wouldn't be so intuitive either by looking at your guys' work. It wouldn't seem to go, but you do have collector base in common, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Black and white illustrative storytelling and woven colored glass. I mean, it's just, you never know. So it's just kind of cool to see.
Well, one thing that I found a little humorous about what Mick was talking about is how if somebody comes into his booth and buys something too quickly, that he can sometimes delay the purchasing time because he wants to talk more about it, right? And I thought that was brilliant. And it actually reminded me of something that happened with Renee and I in our booth this past year. I don't know if you've ever had this where it can be super unclear if a collector is saying to you, I want to buy that. You know what I mean? Like they're not giving you the right words and you don't want to just be like, okay, I'll wrap it up for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have been known to be like, to maybe jump the gun a little bit too soon, but man, when somebody wants to buy it, I'm like, boom. I am listening for those words. Maybe it's because of like, I don't super love the interaction, like that long drawn out thing. I'm kind of always looking for the exit in my conversations. And I want it to end in a sale, and I'm trying to drag it on until I get the sale and see if they have anything left to say. But I'm also kind of like, man, I just don't want to talk anymore. I want you to leave.
You'll take yes as an answer, right?
Yes, I will.
So this happened to us. Renee was cleaning the glass at one of our shows this past summer, and a woman walks in and she says to her, I really like that piece. And of course, she gave the thank you. I appreciate that. And then she goes, no, I like that piece. And she's like, oh, okay. But she didn't say at that moment that I wanted to buy it. She just kept saying how much she liked it. And then the woman said in a very robotic, drawn out way, I would like to buy this piece. And we're like, oh, okay. All right. There you go. Now you said the right thing.
Well, maybe she was she mush mouthing the I'd like this piece?
It's possible. It's possible. Yeah. Maybe she was thinking she said it, but we weren't going to like start rapping until we knew that's what she actually meant. So
yeah, somebody came into my booth in Plaza a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying to be really patient and kind with him and just generous. He's showing me images. He was very into like America and freedom, and I was just like, just super not into it at all.
Yeah.
And he's showing me and he's proud. I'm like, yes, you have a lot of skill. I really want you to leave with a good attitude, but also the operable sentence is just leave, please.
It's time to go.
I can't do it anymore. I just didn't want it.
I mean, and we don't ever want to be all about the sale. I mean, because there is connection and
absolutely
instilling in like young people, for example, an artistic, creative future in them. But you can only look at so many, pieces of a beginner art or artist or something before it's like, I got to get back to putting energy into what I'm here to do. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's tough.
Your prints, stencils are amazing, sir. I'm good luck and get out.
I mean, I've been known to look at quite a few Chihuly exhibits on people's phones and feign like I've never seen it before.
Ooh, he's your hero. Oh, it's my hero again. Oh, you love him.
There he is.
Yeah. Chihuly tattoos.
So, yes, you brought up earlier that I talked with Keith Grace this week, and it was a great talk. We were next to him at the last show in Kansas City, and I got home, and I thought to myself, we talked all weekend, and I think this would be an interesting talk for the community to hear. I really had a good time sitting down and talking to him.
Yep. He's one of those guys. I just always look forward to seeing Keith and his lovely wife, Sherry. This was just a solo interview with Keith. Sherry definitely does a lot of the support of the show, and they're always there together. He mentions that in the interview there, talking about how difficult it must be for people to travel and do these things alone, and how great it is that the two of them get to go out and show off his work. And they're just amazing people.
Absolutely. Well, without further ado, let's jump into this talk and hear what Keith Grace has to tell us about him and his artwork. So here's Keith Grace, now in Greenville, South Carolina.
This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap. the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
Well, sometimes I'm in a real hurry, and I just love that I have things that are saved in Zap to streamline my process.
To that end, Douglas, one of my tricks with Zap is to favorite all of the shows that I'm even remotely considering. That way I can filter them all and then look at all the deadlines at once.
But then there's other times when I have a little more time on my hands and I'm looking into other shows and I want to get to know about the show, and all the information is right there in the prospectus with links to the website. I can see who the artists are that have participated in the past.
You know, that's a great idea, Douglas, because one of the ways that I was finding shows at the very beginning was to go online and see who I felt my work looked good with.
It's just great that all that information is organized and easy to look over when planning our next show season. Keith Grace is my guest today here on the Independent Artist Podcast. Hi, Keith. How are you?
Hey, Doug. I'm great. How are you? Long time no see.
We just spent the whole weekend together on the streets of Kansas City, didn't we?
We did. It was great being your neighbor again. I think this is like the third or fourth time we've been next door neighbors.
You and Sherry have been next to us more than any other exhibitor out there that I can think of. So we were excited when we saw that was going to happen again.
Yeah.
You guys are always fun to be neighbors with.
As are you.
Well, when we both found out that, we were setting up, we decided to scooch our booths away to the other side. So, we had a 12 by 12 spaces so we could have a little alleyway between us. What did we call that? Our little art alley that we had to negotiate?
Exactly. Only one person got to use it at a time.
Well, I had told you that early in the weekend, people would come in and they would step in between our two booths and they'd say to me, "Oh, I really like your work," looking at your work. And I'd say, "Oh, the artist is in this booth, so you can go in and talk to him." And they'd smile and they'd walk away. Well, that happened to me like 3 or 4 times, but I didn't tell you this part. Eventually, in the middle of the weekend, I just started saying thank you, since they weren't really interested in coming in to talk. They just wanted to acknowledge it and walk away.
That's perfect. That's awesome.
I saved you from having to give them any sassy Sunday comments.
Well, yeah. Sassy Sunday came about where, it'd be like, I'd be tired. It's the end of the weekend, and I would just start kind of playing with people in our conversation. Yeah. And sometimes it would be like, maybe a little too sassy. And Sherry would say, I think it's time you went for a walk. Just go get out of the booth and go for a walk around the show.
She is known to be the voice of reason in your family and business, true?
No question about it.
So, well, I'm glad you could take some time and talk to me. How was your trip home?
It was good. I don't remember being so tired after a show, though. It was like
Same.
we got home, and even today I'm still tired, but it's the last show of the year, so it's just time to get re-energized again. And I do have to get back down to the studio eventually, but like right now, we're just taking a couple days off.
Yeah, I hear you. It did kind of seem that way, but it did feel like we kind of had this buildup of show after show, that after this one, it did kind of feel like we could exhale of like, oh my God, it's done. The race is over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, how long have you been in this selling art on the street business? How long have you been doing that?
33 years.
33.
And the only
Wow.
reason I know that off the top of the head is it was like my first outdoor show was in our local art museum has had this art show going on for many years. It's one of the oldest running outdoor shows. And it happened to be just about 4 or 5 blocks from where we lived. And
Okay.
I remember Sherry coming with the stroller because we had just had our first son. And he was just 3 months old. So it's like, I know exactly how long I've been doing it because that was my first show.
Okay. So that was a memorable kind of marker, mile marker. And was that in Rockford?
It was, yeah.
Well, I know that you didn't step into this world, like you had a career before doing art shows, right? What was that?
I did. I went to art school for graphic design and illustration. And upon graduating, my first job was in a design studio. And that's where I met Sherry, actually.
Oh, cool.
And then my second job I worked for a newspaper. I worked in the newsroom for like 12 and a half years. And I started out as an illustrator and page designer. And that eventually turned into a completely different job. It was kind of at the time, and a lot of younger people are not going to recognize this at
Right.
all, but it was at the time that like USA Today came out, and Gannett News Service was one of the largest running news organizations in the country. And they started doing information graphics. It was interesting to me because it was just another, way to use your creativity. But it was even more important because you had to convey like a lot of information within a small space. But what happened in that process is this industry change happened, that they kind of went away from that hand-drawn illustration, and they just wanted everything to be computer generated and information packed. And that was the disappointing part of it. And we had this editor who came in and just said, no more illustrations, just going to be information graphics. And
so like, would there be like photos, like it replaced it with actual photo imagery, took the place of what you're describing? Or
they could combine photos, but it was mostly, like bar charts, pie charts, but illustrations with like actual information. Like there was something that was explaining, like say a new racetrack was coming into town, and I would do like an illustration of what the racetrack looked like, and I'd have an insert of a map of where it was going to be located, and then I'd have facts about the race industry, and you would build these big graphics that just provided a lot of information for the reader just to look at and absorb without having to read the whole story. It was hopefully to entice them to read the whole story too.
Okay, and that was for use of like USA Today, or?
That was for the Rockford Register Star, which was a Gannett newspaper, and Gannett also owned USA Today.
Okay.
The funny thing about it was like I was really kind of upset when that came over, when they said no more illustration. I mean, that's what I love to do.
Right.
I love to do a unique illustration almost every day, for a story. And they kind of took that away. But, as they say, there's always a silver lining, because I didn't have that outlet of drawing or painting or doing whatever each day for illustration. I decided that I'd pick up my paintbrushes and start painting. And I just started like on my dining room table and started doing work. And it was my outlet for that creative part of it.
Okay. Did that shift come pretty quickly then, where you were then making work for yourself? Or was that just for a while you were working this job, but then doing this as like your kind of like your hobby or something that you could express yourself?
Yeah, it was definitely hobby started. It was, I'd come home for work and just kind of start experimenting with paints, and I was doing a lot of figurative work, and then some friends and some other people saw it, and they just said, well, you should work towards doing like a show. And some friends of ours had a little gallery, and they said, yeah, definitely, let's get enough work together for a show. And they gave me a deadline, which is always the best way to create more work.
For sure.
And I've always worked well on a deadline. And I think that also comes from working for the newspaper.
Right. Light the fire under the butt to make it happen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot, I talk to a lot of artists, and they say they like a deadline or they need a deadline, to really
some artists, like during COVID, when they didn't have anything to push up against, nothing to plan for, it was hard for them to stay on track with producing because they needed that, that pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So then what made the switch? What made you step out of the newspaper world, the graphic world, and into your own business? How did that happen?
My job evolved with the newspaper, and I actually became like the graphics editor, and I started becoming part of like the news judgment. I'd go to the meetings, and we'd talk about which stories were going to be on the front page and which needed photographs and graphics and things like that. And I really kind of got an on the job education on journalism, and it was a really cool time to be a journalist. It was actually, everybody had their beats, and everybody was, I worked with really cool people that were very passionate about their beats and their reporting and their writing, and worked with great editors and everything. But I could see that by the time, like the 90s came, things started shifting, and it became a little less information and kind of became a little bit more infotainment in a way to me.
Oh,
And it just like, I could just see the change happening in the journalism part of it. And so Sherry and I started our graphic design business, and I got to do a lot more illustration with our clients that we had with that. Making that break is hard because you're raising two kids and
yeah.
you've got insurance and all that kind of stuff. But it was like Sherry always was very supportive and just said, let's just do this. And
So you said you met at a design house. What is that? Is that a place that does graphic design for like companies and ad agency
correct.
type stuff?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. So we would do all kinds of things like corporate identities and brochures, annual reports. We'd do 3D design, for product design and
Okay.
everything from like, yeah, trade show design. I mean, we did everything.
Mm.
So it was.
And was that Sherry's, was she part of the creative aspect of that too? Is that when you said you met her and you were in that business?
Yeah, absolutely. And she continued on when I worked at the newspaper. She continued on to work in the advertising and design field.
Cool.
And then when we were finally able to kind of start our own thing and that kind of took off, that's when I was able to break away. And in the meantime, I had still been doing painting, and I'd still, like, after that first show I told you about, it's like the next year I did like 2 shows, and then the next year I did like 3 shows, and they were all very close by, like Madison and Chicago and Rockford, and kind of like kept within a couple hours of where we lived.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started having some success with that as well at the same time that we had our design business. And then I wanted to pursue it even more. And I thought, well, if I quit paper, I could still work with Sherry on the design stuff, but I could pursue other shows and start traveling greater distances. And pretty soon I was doing 7 shows a year, then 10 shows a year, and just kept building from there.
It sounds like you had kind of like a layering of different income streams. And then once one thing started to get stronger, you felt like you could start letting things go. And then your own art business became more in the forefront.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I think it was when I started traveling more, and I guess it's kind of about finding your market too. And especially when I started doing, shows in the Chicago area,
Mm-hmm.
the more urban market was like, they were like much bigger and better than, I had experienced before.
Okay.
And that's when you meet other artists from around the country and you start talking with them about what they're doing, and they inspired me, and I was a sponge. I took, all the information I could from a lot of people and just started a build up of like, hey, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
I think I can do this. I think I could just live off of painting. And it's a leap of faith, no question about it. But
no kidding. Yeah. Chicago was kind of a good place to have that so close, because there were so many opportunities for an artist and an art market in that area.
Absolutely.
Rockford isn't like a suburb or anything, but it was still within you could be home the next day and working on whatever other projects you have going on other than painting.
And we kind of had to get home the next day because we had to get the kids off to school on Monday.
Sure.
So it was like, but I was fortunate. I also had a lot of family that lived around us. So we had a lot of support from family and friends that helped us out too. So
and you have
a lot of help along the way.
Yeah. You have 2 boys?
I do, yeah.
Did they travel with you, or were those early years you tried to go off on your own and have them with other people?
They did travel with us.
Okay.
They were actually pretty darn helpful, with setting up, but also like, if Sherry and I were busy setting up, we'd go see if somebody else needs some help. And at the time, they knew all the artists, so they would stop in and they'd give artists breaks, and they'd watch their booth for them, and they'd help them set up or go get them food. And it really became like an interactive part of our tribe, I guess is the good way to say it.
Definitely, yeah. It is an interesting life that we pass on to our kids growing up in this business. There's so many skills that they learn just from observing us working and doing what we're doing. It's pretty cool.
And, the funny thing was, like, both of my boys were, it may sound biased, but I'm going to say it anyway. I thought they were just artistically, like, more creative than I ever was in, like, school, grade school, high school even. And it's like, but neither one of them wanted to pursue a career in art. And I'd say, why? I mean, you're so talented. And they said, It's so
I
hard.
know. My kids, the same thing. They're like, oh my God, you have to work so hard to do what you do. Oh, man. So would you say that your career of working with newspapers and graphic design, that really influenced your body of work and what you make?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about that. And I think back on it, and I really did. I loved that job
Mm-hmm.
while it lasted. Of course, the thought of being able to make it on my own was, even more enticing. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I look at my work now, and I, incorporate a lot of text, and I always love maps, and my work certainly has super graphic quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all influence from my past for sure.
I know when we first saw your work, when we got on the scene, it seemed like you were everywhere. I mean, you were on posters and show promotions. I remember stepping up to your work, and of course, from far away, you can see the subject of your piece. It might be a man with a fedora on his head, or a dog, or whatever the subject is. And then you step up and you see all the layering with the collage. And that was the first I'd ever been exposed to that kind of detail and that kind of layering. I was just so impressed with how you could tell a deeper, more layered story by what you do. Can you describe that process?
Sure. Yeah. So I always tell people that my painting style evolved from my illustration style, because when I worked at the newspaper, I would always work on vellum, and I'd use either paint or color pencil or washes on top of this
Mm.
vellum. And because it took the medium really well, and it was very smooth, and
And what is vellum?
it's like a paper, but it's very translucent. It's cloudy, but
Mm.
it's translucent.
Okay.
It takes like pen and paint and colored pencil and markers. It accepts all the mediums
Mm.
really well. So that's why I chose to work on it. But I remember one time coming back from a meeting, and I had this illustration that I was really pretty proud of. And I came back into my desk, and I just threw it on my desk, and I had all these papers, magazine pictures and papers, and I threw it on there, and I saw all this type coming through the illustration, and it was just like, wow. It was just like a happy
Mm-hmm,
accident.
mm-hmm.
That looked really cool. So I started experimenting with doing my first works were on vellum, and I was collaging from behind,
Oh,
which was
okay.
a really different process. And I loved it. I thought it had a really cool effect. But then I wanted to actually apply paint heavier. So I had to kind of reverse the whole
Uh-huh.
process. And so I had to do the collage work first and then build the painting and layers over it. So that's how I got to the process that I'm doing right now. And it's evolved, of course, over the years,
Yeah.
but it's still the same
Well,
process.
what is interesting to me by having the pieces behind the vellum, almost like under like a sheet of cloudy glass or whatever, there's no texture between each of the pieces of paper or the maps or whatever you're using as the collage. And it's like a smooth transition. And I noticed that is still prevalent in the work you do now with it on the top, because it seems like they just flow right into each other. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't seem like all of these hodgepodge pieces put together. It's so smooth.
It's like a giant jigsaw puzzle in a way. Like when I start, especially a big piece, it's like I kind of visualize what I want the background to look like. I always want some contrast in size and color and weight, and even the typography, the fonts that I choose and everything. And so I'll start with the larger letters or map pieces, and I'll put those down first, and then I'll put like more medium sized pieces in, and then I start filling in with smaller text images
Mhm.
and or map pieces. And it's a time consuming piece because I'm able to achieve like a kind of almost a seamless effect on the background. I
Exactly. Yeah.
hand tear each piece so that all the edges are feathered too, so that when I do collage it down, it lays really flat, and it can even overlap the other piece, but it doesn't really look like it because
Hmm.
it's feathered out. And then it's a lot of layers of matte medium for my collaging, and then till it's as smooth as possible before I start the painting.
Some of the imagery feels very like 50s, would you say? Is that kind of from that era? Is there something about that time period that resonates with you?
I don't know. I mean, I've always been attracted to that. I think it goes back to, like when I was a kid and my mom would take us to church and everybody was dressed so proper and beautiful, men in the fedoras and their suits and the women in their hats and gloves
Mhm.
and dresses, and my mom dressed beautifully, and there was just such an elegance about
Mm.
it, and I think that's always kind of stuck with me. And then I just started collecting like a lot of like magazines, and I'd go to estate sales all over the place and pick up vintage magazines, and I would just flip through them, and I'd just rip out pages that I thought images or poses or clothing or something that inspired me, and I'd keep a file of that, and that's usually what I go back to all the
Hmm.
time.
But it takes you back to your childhood, kind of that period of that elegance, that kind of put together feel. That something about that really is a driving force for your work.
It is, and I think it's also combined with like I love old movies
Mm.
too. On Saturdays I'd watch all the old movies, and I loved Hitchcock movies and The Shadow.
Mhm.
In my work I used a lot of
Yeah, I
shadows,
did
and
notice that.
it was a kind of at a very young age. I always was so attracted to the shadows in just people walking by or on TV or in movies or whatever, especially like Hitchcock movies and everything. They
Totally.
played such an important role.
That's cool. So, speaking of childhood, were you an artistic kid? I mean, obviously, you decided to go to school for graphic design. Did that come from a creative background as a kid?
It did. Actually, I think well, I know I knew by the time I was in second grade that I was going
Oh,
to be
cool.
an artist. I didn't know what it was going to be, but it was just like, I was just like, nope, that's it. I don't need to decide anything else. I'm going to be an artist one way
Okay.
or the other. And it was actually really interesting because I went to Catholic school, and in second grade you got art class like one day a week where someone would roll in a cart of stuff,
Right.
and you'd have art class like that, and I just couldn't wait for that day to come in, and my second grade teacher actually called my mom and said, "Yeah, you need to get him maybe the museum offers some classes or something." And my mom was always super encouraging,
Nice.
with the artwork, and even my grandma before that. Like we had this one of those typical old downtowns where my grandma would get on the bus and go down and get her hair done once
Mhm.
a week, but there was always like great shops down there, and I'm one of five kids, and she would always take one of us every Saturday to go down, and we'd always get to stop at like the office supply store because they had every color of paper in the world, and you could buy it by the sheet. And my grandma would buy tons of paper and markers and pencils and things
Mhm.
like that. And it was just like we always just had drawers full of art
That's
supplies.
cool. I mean, not a lot of kids get that kind of encouragement. They might push somebody in a different direction, but they saw that was your strength and what you were really drawn to do, and they provided you with those opportunities to explore.
And my mom used to always say, like, I don't know where you get it from, and
Oh,
it's like, oh, mom, it's you,
she's
because it's
creative.
like yeah, she was this incredible like seamstress and incredible cook, and everything she did. She wasn't a painter or illustrator or anything like that, but everything she did was so creative and artistic in my eyes. Don't people say that to you sometimes? It's like, I don't know. I can't draw a
Right.
straight line. I don't know how you do that. And it's like, you probably are a lot more creative than you're giving yourself credit for. And it might not be in my medium or your medium or
Sure.
whatever. It's like, and if they're like a doctor or something like, I can never do what you do. So, you know,
Right. Well, people, they do. They think of it as one thing. Like, I probably would not have ever thought of myself as an artist because I did struggle to pick up a pencil and translate what I could visually see into like an image until I got my hands on a blowpipe and started making glass. I was like, oh, this is how I can realize my creativity. So there's lots of different ways. And when I was a kid, I didn't even know glass blowing existed. So there's some
right.
things that are really that people think of immediately when they think of an artist. They think of a painter, or they think of a sculptor, perhaps. But like you said, your mom didn't feel like she was creative, but she was in so many different areas. Yeah.
Right.
So when you decided to go to art school, or was it to do graphic? I mean, I hear a lot of artists talk about graphic design, and that is often, I think, kind of like the career that creatives go into because they think this is a career I can make a living at versus being somebody who put it out to faith, So was that kind of your idea in mind when you went in for graphic design, or how did that work?
It was because, the ugly truth is, it's kind of beaten in your head as like, you'll never make it as an
Yeah.
artist. So you better have like some type of career to fall back on. And obviously I didn't listen to them, but it's like, it was kind of like you need a more practical, degree and more practical skills where you can actually get a job. And I mean, I love the idea of graphic design too. I thought it was super fascinating, and even at that time, I had no idea that I would be able to make a living as a painter. I had no real like desire to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like when I went to school and I absolutely loved art school and I loved the graphic design and I loved the illustration. And the really cool thing about the school that I went to was a design school, but it was like all of my illustration teachers were painters. And so I got this extra education about painting, all different mediums. I think that just really helped make me make the transition later, because I did have those skills from school and the education that I got from these teachers was pretty amazing.
Well, and let's face it, I mean, even though you were going in a direction where the thought was, I need to be employable, those skills served you in being your own independent and first in your design business and then in your own art practice. So, I mean, all those skills along the way got you to where you are.
Absolutely. No question about that. Yeah. And, I just want to do a shout out here. Okay.
Yep, so let's get a shout out there.
I'm going to do a shout out to all of the teachers I had from grade school on through high school and college. And it was like, I remember them. I remember their names. I remember how they inspired and taught, and they all shaped the artist I am today. And then you couple that with support from your mom and your siblings and your friends, and then later on, all these incredible artists I met when I started doing shows. It's like I just feel so lucky to have had so much inspiration in my life from other people.
I hear you. It's like if you didn't have that nurturing kind of push, things might not be what they are now. I mean, I know that you love the life that you've created and you love what you do. And some people might not have found that path if they wouldn't have had that supportive kind of group to lead you on that way.
I know you're right. I mean, we've had friends. I still have friends that are just so amazingly talented, but they either didn't want to open themselves up to rejection, or they didn't have the confidence to do a show. They didn't have the drive. Whatever the reason is, it's just like, it's a shame. We were talking about this weekend about like, there's nothing constant about this business, and there's nothing. No. When you describe what you do to people, they're just like, really? Like,
you ride that wave all the time. You're like, you can go to a show, travel across country and not make your expenses back. And then the next one, you might go gangbusters, but you just don't know what end of the spectrum you're going to get.
Or you could have a great show and then not get juried in the next year or two. And you're like,
yeah.
Oh, that was such a big part of my income last year, And
I know. I had a cousin who visited me at this show. She lives in Kansas City and she's about my age. And she asked how things were going. And I had told her we were doing very well. And I was very happy with how the sales were going. And then she asked, because, she didn't know. The people don't understand this industry or this business. And she says, well, if you sold well, that must mean that you'll for sure get in next year, right? I said, actually, it doesn't, and I explained how rejurying and new jurors and all that. And and explaining it all. And she's like, well, that should be a component of it, right? And I explained that whole concept of, well, there's that line between what is art? Is art a commercial commodity? Are we selling something that can sell? And if it sells, does that mean it's not good art? It's like we could really get ourselves in a weird mind mess trying to wrap our brains around that sort of thing.
And I've done that. I've had that conversation in my head many times. I think we all have.
Yeah.
It's that balance between commercial success and your own personal artistic integrity, I guess, and and we have to balance that, I mean, of course we want to sell. I mean, it's our livelihood, that's the one thing, you always have to remind people. It's like, this is our livelihood. We're not just here exhibiting for fun. But it's like, a lesson that I learned a long time ago was whenever I tried to make something that I thought would sell is the very thing that won't sell, and I think that if you kind of trust your instincts, your imagery and your technique and everything like that, and just kind of do what you want to do from your heart, that's the stuff that usually
it hits. Yeah. Instead of trying to make that particular dog to match a collector's particular interest, right?
Oh, you're funny because, I just got done telling you that I wouldn't do that. And then I took on a commission this week and it was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, it's like, it was a big piece and it's kind of like, well, damn it.
Did they ask you if you would paint their dog?
Well, no. Oh my I know where you're going with that one. And I think it's like, would you do my dog? And I say, well, that's a personal question. And,
it is a personal question.
No, but that'll be a Sassy Sunday one where Sherry say, you need to go take a walk, But
Right.
The truth is, like most people, like I think they're just use that as a way to start a conversation. It's like they see a dog, people are mad about their dogs, and they're like, it's like they like your work, but it's got to be their dog, and it's like, but I always know it's never going, or I shouldn't say never now, because I just picked one up.
Right. You just literally just backpedaled on what you staunchly told me this weekend when you said, I don't do commissions.
Right. Well, so when people come in and they say that, would you do my dog? And I'll say, well, it's kind of a personal question. They go, what? And I go, oh, nothing. I said, what did you ask me? And they'll say, would you do my dog? And I said, well, it depends. What kind of dog do you have? And they'll say, whatever. They'll say, cockerdoodle or something. I go, God, no, I hate those dogs. And before the look on their face is absolutely priceless. But before they can even say anything, I'm just kidding. No, I don't do commission work. And it's like they're just kind of like a little bit horrified, and then they're like, oh, okay. And like whoever is with them, whatever their partner or friend or whatever, they just bust out laughing because they
get it. They get it immediately, right?
Yeah, right. But
But that's another a point about you is that you do have this really great sense of humor, and you employ that whenever you can when having conversations with your collectors. I mean, it's just part of you.
Well, it's fun. I certainly don't do it to insult them or anything. And I don't really hate their breed of dog. It doesn't matter what breed they say, I'm going to say.
Right. You're going to have the same answer.
Right.
But it makes for a fun weekend for your neighbors. That's true.
Absolutely.
So about, I think it's been about 6 years now, right? That since you made the big move out to Greenville?
Yeah, 7 years ago. Yeah,
7 years. What prompted that big change?
Well, our boys are grown and gone. They settled out west, Baxter's in Denver and Cola's in Northern California. And we thought we'd follow them out there because we knew we wanted to get out of the Midwest.
And there's nothing holding you there. I mean, once they're up and gone, right? So it's like,
right. Yeah, like we can live anywhere and do what we do. And we just kind of thought, we could be super comfortable here. And it's kind of like, it's a weird thing to say, but it's like, we kind of wanted to get out of our comfort zone. And it's just like, well, a lot of people are just like kind of late in life to just pick up and leave everything, your family and friends and all that. And it's like, well, why not? What's the worst? Worst case scenario, we move back, but it was like, I think we both felt Sherry and I both felt that we needed this change. We just needed a spark. We needed to be re-inspired. And so I had been doing Artisphere since like 2010. And it was like, I never really saw myself in the South, but it was like, this was a really cool city. And it was very welcoming. And we'd meet people every year doing the show. And then Signe and Genna had moved there just like a year or two before, and they were like encouraging us to come down. And
so there was kind of a tribe there that you felt like, you said leaving friends and family in Rockford, but there's the family that we create out there. So it wouldn't be like you're all alone.
Right, exactly. Of course, the weather was better too. It's beautiful in Greenville. And what I liked about Greenville the most is that it's a city that has transformed itself. I mean, completely.
How so?
Well, people would always say, well, if you were here 30 years ago, you wouldn't recognize a single thing. And so there were a lot of big changes. And there was a mayor that was he wanted to build up downtown. He wanted to change it. Like I guess you wouldn't be caught dead in that downtown area. Have you been to Greenville before?
I haven't, no.
Well, you have to come visit. But their downtown is spectacular. And so they had a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 50-year plan. And they still do to this day. And they've been sticking to it. And they've absolutely transformed the whole city. And I really kind of like that because I was from a city, Rockford, which I loved. It's my hometown and everything. And there was a lot of creative people that had a lot of creative ideas. But all these ideas would just get stuck when it came down to budget, And so
in Rockford, you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it's kind of like Greenville was the opposite. It's like they had all these great ideas and they followed through on them. And
like, did they want to have like more art, more of a contemporary scene, that sort of thing? Is that what the changes were kind of geared around?
Absolutely. They wanted it to be all of those things. And
a destination for tourism? Is that part of it too?
Well, that's what it evolved into. And now it's huge, for tourism here. But I think one of the big impetuses for change too was that BMW, the only plant in the United States, came to Greenville, Spartanburg. And I think that when you have I've heard people speak to this, that, when you have a big European company like that, it's like, and they come over, they have certain or different expectations as far as culture and education and, restaurants and art and, all kinds of things. And I think that was also an inspiration for them to build on that,
Okay.
Right. It's such a huge employer. And, with a car company, you have all the subsidiary companies, European companies that come as well. And so it made it a much different city, I think, for them. And they just kept growing and building on that growth, but in a really smart way.
All of those factors were like, this might be the place for our next chapter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Did you initially say that you were thinking of moving out by your kids, but then once the whole kind of idea of we could move anywhere, then it was like the whole country was kind of under review for where you might end up?
Yeah. So Sherry went to college in Denver and she loved it. And we thought we'd end up at least Colorado. I knew we couldn't afford California, that's for sure. And then when we got out to Colorado, it was like, we found out we really couldn't afford Colorado either,
Yeah.
Well, we could, but it was just like, it was different. We knew that we were like mountain people. It seems like the mountains there were just like a lot more severe and hard, whereas the mountains here in the southeast were greener and friendlier. And so, because we used to do a lot of hiking and like a lot of times we'd be on the road for a show and we would just pull over if we were near like a trailhead and just get out of the van and do a 3-mile hike or something through something just to kind of, get us out of the van basically. But I always found beauty and inspiration in hiking. So we kind of realized that we were kind of like mountain people. And so when we decided that we didn't want to move out west, we just figured, we're going to be a plane ride away from our kids no matter where.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we started looking between Greenville and Asheville and everywhere in between because the mountains are beautiful here. And when we ultimately decided that Greenville had the most to offer for us, which we were leaning anyway. We found a house and it's on the mountain. Greenville has
Wow.
a mountain, and we kind of found our dream house, and it all just worked out so cosmically, actually.
Yeah, right.
Even finding the house was a real interesting story because we had been back like 5 or 6 times. There was nothing on the market, and there's so few houses on the mountain, and they rarely go up for sale. And so we found another house and we put an offer on it, and we didn't get it. So we just came home and just said, well, let's put our house on the market, because Rockford wasn't as strong a real estate market at the time. And it's like, who knows how long it's going to take to sell that.
Oh, okay.
Well, a week later, we get 2 full price offers on our house in Rockford. It's like, oh my God, we got to go back down and find a house or we're going to be homeless. So
Sure.
we go back down, and we had been combing the mountain. There's only one major road that goes through the mountain where the residents live in.
Okay.
We took this one street that makes like a circle right off of the main road, and we see this house, and it's like this California flat roof modern house. And Sherry goes, I bet you want to live there, don't you? And I go, I do. Why don't you pull over and ask them if they want to sell it? And she goes, I will.
Oh, it wasn't
not.
up for sale?
No, there was no sign. I go, just go up and knock on the door to see if they want to sell it. She goes, I will not, and she kept driving, and so in the meantime, Signe again, I had some friends that lived on the mountain, and they invited us over for dinner. And so we're having dinner at these new acquaintances. They're like, oh, we love meeting you. I'd love for you to move on the mountain. And I excused myself to go check my phone because we were meeting with the realtor and the next day. And I get a email from her, and she goes, hey, this just came on the market like an hour ago. It looks like you guys, I went ahead and set up a
viewing
showing for you. And it was that house.
Oh, you're kidding.
So I came back to the table and everyone goes, what's wrong? I said, you're not going to believe this, Sherry. It's like, this house just came on the market an hour ago.
And you got it.
And we got it. Yeah.
Oh.
We knew instantly. We walked in. We both walked separate ways. We came back. We're like, yep.
Wow.
So that's why I say it was very cosmic, the whole move. And that it was meant to be,
It was.
And so we were happy with that.
So did you have to do any work on it? Or was it kind of like move-in ready? Or how did that go?
No, we did do some work on it. It was pretty dark. First thing we did was we tore out the whole kitchen and put in a new kitchen. And we lived like the whole back of the house is kind of all glass in it. We don't have a mountain view. We just have like a forest view on our side, but it's beautiful. And so we did that. And it was actually kind of a good thing because we just set up in the living room. We set up a coffee pot and a microwave, and we would have like breakfast and lunch at home. And then we'd just go out to dinner somewhere, and we'd go and we'd pick a different restaurant. We'd sit at the bar, and it was just like, we met so many people just sitting, talking to them, at the bar. And
you experienced the community, right? And you were like open to meeting people who lived there.
Absolutely. And so it was like within months, and I think we had a bigger circle of friends than we ever had, back in Rockford.
Oh my gosh.
People are just very friendly and open about doing that. And again, it gets back to that, like I said, it's such a welcoming city anyway. And then they're like, oh, you should do this. You should go here. You might want to try this, and it's like, all of a sudden we felt very connected to the community, like
and all
immediately.
What it had to offer and all the different experiences to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, where I was going with the house thing, I was just kind of assuming when you moved into your dream home, that then I know that soon after that, you guys kind of got in the business of flipping houses. So was moving into this place, is that what precipitated you wanting to buy other houses and renovate them and sell them as kind of another project that you worked on?
Yeah. So, when we lived in Rockford, we moved like 6 times. And
oh, you did?
Yeah. Before we were married, even, we bought our first house. It was a tiny little 2-bedroom bungalow, and we fixed it up and realized we wanted more room. And, in a short period of time, we sold it and made a decent profit on it. So then we bought this monster of a Victorian house and did an amazing transformation of that. it was at the same time we were trying to, have a family. And Sherry said, well, let's just get this project, get our mind off of it and we'll just start working on this house. Well, like 11 days later, we close on the house and she's pregnant. So it's like, it worked, it got our minds off of it. Yeah. But then we worked on this, and this was like this 3-story house. It was really cool. And we redid that and then found another really cool, like kind of mid-century modern house. And so we sold that big house and built some equity in that as well. And then, so we ended up doing that. We'd live in the house while we renovated, and we had a really good time, renovating these houses.
So this has been something you've done for your whole life together, it sounds like.
It was, yeah, but it was mostly for ourselves, and then Rockford's, real estate market wasn't like that strong, like I had said before, but we couldn't actually make a living out of it doing it there.
Okay.
So when we got to Greenville, we're like, oh, you know what? Maybe we could do this, like, as if we're not busy enough.
Yeah, I was going to say, you only have 100 other things going on.
Right. But this house went for sale right down the street from us. So it was literally like 6 houses down. And it's like, well, we could do that and we could take our time. And, it was like a 4,000 square foot house. So, it was
there's a lot to do.
Well, we did it and we loved it and sold it. And, there was something about because you couldn't find like cheap houses to flip because there was already a lot of people doing that. So it's like, we had to take it, like, we have to get a different market. We have to buy a bigger, nicer house, invest more upfront, but then profit's going to be bigger, right?
Right.
I mean, in theory. And
it's kind of like the risk of being an art fair artist who shoots for the high end type market with who we're selling to. We're comfortable with those kinds of buyers, and it doesn't seem out of the realm that would be the kind of buyer that you'd be looking towards with the home flipping thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just a different way of using our creativity. It's still like, it's just a lot of fun and shopping for materials and
totally
bath vanities and the kitchen counters and cabinets and all the lighting. I mean, that's a blast. And then we did as much work as we could, but we also were fortunate enough to have find some contractors that could do the stuff that we're not comfortable with, like electric or plumbing or whatever. We would subcontract out all of that, but we would design the house completely, and we'd do a lot of demo, and we'd of course do all the finishing, painting, and all that kind of stuff, and everything in between. We'd just do what we could.
Well, you are two people who, we get this question a lot when people come in our booth. They'll say to Renee and I, you guys can work so well together. I can't work with my spouse. I can't paint a room with my spouse. But I see a similarity in you and Sherry as with me and Renee is not only do we have our business together, but we do lots of activities together. We're like best friends. And you guys work so well together in those kinds of projects and all those multiple projects that you guys do together.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how amazing Sherry is and what a great partner she is in everything that we do. And I could see that, of course, with you and Renee too. I love the way you guys work together because I get to listen in on
right over here
working with your customers and everything like that. And you're both so patient and kind with the clients, and sometimes they're just unsure, and sometimes they just need a little
room
pushing.
Yeah.
And you guys are so good at that, and you do it like seamlessly. You play off each other really well.
That's interesting. I don't notice that. It's interesting to hear from an observer because I don't get that perspective because we're in it. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, but Sherry and I have had this. We always we play to each other's strengths too, and like you mentioned earlier, oh, is Sherry the voice of reason? Well, yeah, of course she is. And she's always she's the checkbook too,
okay.
As far as I'm like, let's do this. And she's like, no, we can't do that, and, I dream big, and then she puts it back into reality. It's like, no, we can't do that.
This is what we can do. Yes, this is what we can do, and this is what we can't do. But yeah,
right. But yeah, she's really great, and she, to be honest, I don't know how people do shows alone because it's like I don't know, I guess I've turned into like the biggest baby because it's like, if I have to do a show alone, I feel like I, I don't even know how to put the booth together, and it's
Right.
like, it's just to having that support and having someone that, contributes so much, I couldn't do it without her.
I
Let's face it.
honestly, I am curious, like, so what is Sherry's role in the overall business? I mean, you've told us some of the titles or whatever that she acquires. You're the art. I mean, does she ever give any kind of feedback, or do you ask for feedback regarding what you're making, or is that strictly on you?
I like to say it's strictly on me. I like to work solo. I don't even like people watching me work,
Mm-hmm.
and I not even sharing. For whatever reason, I just feel like I'm so focused on what I'm doing that I don't want any prejudgment on anything,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want any suggestions. But when I'm struggling with something, when I know something isn't right, all I have to do is say, Sherry, come here. What's wrong with this? And she just immediately points and goes, that is what's wrong with
And
it.
she
And
knows,
it's like,
right?
and she's always dead on, and it's like, it's frustrating to me because it's like I'm working so hard and it's like I'm working and working and I can't figure out, there's just something not right about it,
Mm.
and she's able to just come in 2 seconds later, she's pointing at it and just saying, you need to rework that right there. And she's
Well, I
right.
think, but I would say it's a combination of her creativity, but more so knowing you. You know what I'm saying? Maybe knowing you and knowing your work. And it sounds like she didn't necessarily give you, in that example, give you the solution. She just knew if she pointed you in the spot that needed your work to be reworked, then you could fix it.
Yeah. She's not criticizing. She's just saying, there's something not right about this,
Yeah.
and it's like, and then I can look at it and go, you're right. And a lot of times I feel like I can figure it out because especially with bigger pieces, when I'm working on them, I have them laid out, propped up against the walls around my studio because
Okay.
I have to live with them. They evolve as I work on them,
Yeah.
and so the most asked question I get at an art fair is, how long did it take you to do this piece? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I don't really have an answer for that because I never work on a painting from start to finish. I always have
Mm-hmm.
several pieces going at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think I have to live with them before I rush a finish to them,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes there's just something that just, looks off, and it just might be just a shadow is too sharp, or
Mm-hmm.
the shadow is not following the curve of an arm or something like that. And that's the kind of thing that Sherry can point out immediately. She used to do like a lot of fashion illustration on her first job, and
Oh, cool.
um, you know, yeah, and she just has a critical eye. There's no question about it, and definitely a critical eye in the flipping the homes too. I mean, she's really good at that.
In the designing of like what kinds of features you put in the homes, that sort of thing, or in the business side, or all of it? What are you
All of it,
talking about?
really. Yeah, yeah. She's good at that, and she's also like she's kind of like she demands kind of like a perfection from like the subcontractors and things like that, where I'll be like, that's good enough. She'll be like, no, it's not, and
Yeah,
she'll go talk to, and she's very like, because it drives her nuts. If something's off, like a quarter of an inch, it's gonna like, it'll drive her mad. So it's like, she just assume face it up front, just say, you need to redo that because that's driving me crazy,
for
looking at
sure.
it, and whereas I'm more like, it looks pretty good, but
Yeah,
she's much better at that.
but you're creating something that you're intending to not just live with. You're intending for somebody else to live with it. And it sounds like she's got a real eye for attention to detail, because you don't want that to be the holdup. Let's say this trim isn't right or whatever. If that's the holdup of the sale, then, that's good that she pays that close of attention.
It absolutely is. And it's like, especially when you're getting down to the end of a job, I'm just like, I'm so over this,
Right. You're just
let's
ready to be done with it, right?
and
Yeah.
she's more like, no, we got to do it right, and that's one of the things we've always, we had a rule that like when we're working on these houses, it's like, we don't cut any corners and we don't use any inferior products. We design it as if we're going to live in it or our kids are going to live in it.
Okay.
And that way
Cool.
you can feel good about selling it and selling it to the next person, so.
Well, that's interesting. It sounds like you say you're making the house for yourself. It's almost like when we make art for ourselves, you're kind of treating these renovations in a very personal way. True? I mean, or are you looking at what market trends are and what people want? When are you looking at these houses that you're flipping as a product, or is it a little bit like an extension on how you do your artwork?
I think you kind of nailed it there. Yeah. Looking back on it, that's exactly what we do.
Would you say that this move to Greenville and this new chapter in your life has infused kind of a new energy or enthusiasm into your work or into life in general?
Of course. Yeah. I think sometimes if you don't get out of your comfort zone, you're going to tend to kind of just doing the same thing over and over again, right? Like
Sassy Sunday becomes sassy every day.
That's right. No, I get bored too. It's like, I always, feel like there's something else. And I always have a ton more ideas than I have time for what I want to work on. And one thing that I did over COVID was I did a gallery show where I did a completely different body of work, and it was all abstract, and I actually did sculpture work as well.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it was something that started that. Getting back to the newspaper, when I'd have to go to those meetings, which was the least favorite part, of course, was having to go to these meetings.
Right.
But we'd get these printed out like news budgets, and I would constantly draw in all the margins as this meeting's going on. And then every time I'd come back to my office after the meeting, I'd throw the budget into this box I had. And they were just subconscious doodles, basically. And so when I left the newspaper and I started, cleaning out things, I went through this box and I was like, wow, that's really kind of cool looking. Like I have no recollection of drawing it. It was just a subconscious thing. And so I started going through and I collected all of these, and that's what I based this show on. Was I started doing large scale paintings of these doodles that I did.
Yeah.
And then I created some sculptures that looked like them as well. And
what was the material you made the sculptures out of?
I took this heavy condensed foam, like almost like an insulation foam kind of, and glued many pieces together, and then carved out pieces, and then collaged part of them. And then like for the armature all the way around it, I used thumbtacks, and I created like this armature into the foam, and then I would kind of like almost like grout it and then paint over it. And then I did collage work on them. And then I started using other materials like crushed glass and foam letters, and just it was just a cathartic exercise.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it felt really, really great to do something different. And I think artists say it. I hear artists say it all the time. It's like, oh, I wish I had time to experiment with a new body of work. And it's like, we never do have the time, and I think
unless we have a plague like, come across the land.
Right. I mean, but I do think it's like, you say you never have a time. I just don't think we allow ourselves that time.
Right.
And I think that, every other job has continuing education, right?
Yes.
Built into it. Nurses and doctors and dentists and tradesmen, they all have continuing education that they have to do for their jobs. And it's just like, we need to do that for ourselves.
Right.
We had a friend, I think, Barbara Lash, she's just like, we just need to do like art camp. We'll have a different project once a month or once every couple months, and just have different materials and just have a day where we just experiment. And I think that it's a good exercise for anybody.
Right. Last year I was talking to Duke Clausen, and he said that his experience all the years of being on the road doing art shows is that he was like, artists didn't know when to stop succeeding. Like, let's say you've created something that sells well, and they stay on that train of that, and they don't ever step back to innovate on the new thing. And it really does feel like I don't want to step back from, making the thing that is very successful and lucrative right now, because I don't want to lose the opportunity to keep selling it. But it's kind of short-sighted to not take those times to step back and take a month or whatever to experiment with other things and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think that, for example, like that big piece that I sold this weekend, that was my newest piece. And I got such a rush out of doing it because it was a little different I mean, it certainly fit within my body of work, but
Yeah.
it was a different approach altogether. That was like a light bulb goes off. It's just like, yeah, from
Mm.
now on, go in this direction and create everything with this is you're happy with this base here. Now just keep building on it and do
Right.
that. And there's excitement on it. But, at the same time, I do think that, especially for painters, it's like when you're doing a piece and I get very sad. Like if I do piece, I'm very excited about it, but they sell like the first day of a show and it's like, nobody else got to see that,
Right.
and it's like,
Did you get a chance to at least get an image of it to use for images?
oh, yeah, yeah, I did. But I mean, I'm just saying like, it's like, oh, I wish other people could see
No,
that,
I get
and
that
so
part
then
of it
it's like,
too. Sometimes we'll sell something and think, well, we'll photograph it after we get home from the show because we need it for the show. And then it sells. And you're like, I wanted to use that for next year's jury slides and it's gone.
right. Right. But I mean, it's a good problem to have. And it's
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
it's also like, I do see like why artists do kind of recreate some images because at least for me, it's like when I'm working on it, it's like, I want to take it in many different directions,
Mm-hmm.
especially with color and with size. It's like when I did these two images and it's like I sold there was a man and a woman. I sold them right away and I loved them. And it's just like the whole time I was doing them, I was like, I want to make these like 6 feet tall, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's all that kept going through my mind as I'm working on them. It's like, these need to be bigger. These need to be much bigger. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
so I did do them. I did them again and completely different color palette, completely different collage materials and everything. But it was just like, I think that's okay. At least for me, it's okay.
That's great.
But I still think that always continuing with new stuff is the most important.
Cool. Well, with all the things that you've always got going on, is there anything new kind of percolating that you're thinking of, into next year? Any projects you're working on? Any shows? Anything like that?
In all honesty, I'm kind of like slowing down. I'm cutting back on the number of shows, that I'm doing. And we certainly want to, now that we can, start traveling again. And, there's so much inspiration in traveling to a different country and,
Mm-hmm.
and all that. So that's definitely on our list of things we want to do. Another thing that Sharon and I've been talking about is something we want to do here locally is we have a really fantastic arts council here. And I was talking to the director about it and I said, it's one of those things where there's the first Friday things where all the galleries and studios can be open, on first Friday. And we had that back in Rockford and I've seen it in other cities and everything like that. And the only problem with like that first Friday thing is like a lot of times it's just the same work every time you go,
Okay.
And I thought about like maybe creating like more of a pop-up kind of theme type show and creating like these events almost like it's like just a one night kind of deal and
Mm-hmm.
have it in different locations, maybe different artist studios or different businesses or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
the director of the Arts Council was very excited about that. I said, I think it's the one thing that's missing where it's just like something completely unique every single time. And then if you give an artist an assignment
Mm-hmm.
that takes them out of their normal wheelhouse, it gets
Right.
back to what I was telling you about experimenting. Like say you have a themed show, like a food show or a robot show or whatever the theme might be,
Exactly.
it's like, it gives them an opportunity to create something new and wonderful.
It's fun for the artist and it's fun for the patrons to see what kinds of things that the different artists who they maybe collect from their normal body of work, how they might do a take on this other theme or something. I think that's kind of cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. Just to kind of again, like we've got this amazing talent pool here in Greenville and to promote art, but also just make it a destination for people to come to. It's like, oh, the next pop-up is going to be, here and it's going to be all new work. Just create more excitement than, just it's another first Friday, kind of thing, which, I mean, they're great. They're absolutely great, but just maybe just a little bit different approach to build more excitement, anticipation, and hopefully, the artists will sell their work too. So
Definitely. That sounds pretty cool. Well, Keith, this has been a really great hour. I appreciate you taking time and sitting and talking to me and telling me all about yourself. This is cool. This is really cool.
It was really fun. You and Renee are just great people, and the art world is lucky to have you. And Sherry and I are lucky to have you as neighbors again, and hopefully next year we'll be neighbors all over again. So.
All the damn shows. I'm going to start requesting to be your neighbor.
That's the deal.
All right. Well, you take care and give my best to Sherry. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, my best to Renee. Take care.
Bye.
You know, Douglas, like I mentioned before, I felt like I could have answered a lot of those questions myself. It's funny how much of the similar background in the way going out of an illustration department and taking it into a fine art area, and I can see some similarity. It's funny, I can even see some similarities in our work where I can see a lot of them hanging in the same spots, like we mentioned with other artists. I couldn't think more highly of Keith and his work and his family, and just good people. So nice talk there.
So what did you think there at the end when he floated the idea of having an art camp? We can all, as artists, get together and experiment different mediums. And
I think you guys should have a great time.
You don't want to learn the glass blow there,
really lovely for you guys. Yeah, that'd be great. I can't wait to hear all about it.
Okay, well, we'll get back to you on that. We'll let you know what happens.
Well, me and the word camp in any kind of way, I'm not into it. So you guys have your fun.
Yeah.
As soon as you decide to have it at a hotel, I'm on board.
We'll call it a convention. How's that?
There you are.
Convention.
Actually, you know what? I don't like sharing. I don't want to share.
Nix
I don't want
it.
to talk to people any more than I do.
Well, it also kind of started to turn into like this travel ad for Greenville. I think the artists in Greenville wanted to turn into like this big art. I mean, it is an artist hub, but I mean, it's like, come to Greenville. Everybody move to Greenville.
Dude, I love Greenville. I love that city. I love that community and the artist group that have we covered all the Greenville artists yet? Like we've only got a couple more, right?
I don't know. It could be like whack-a-mole. They just keep popping up.
They should, man. It's a good community. You've got it's like high end Hannibal. It's like cost of living's a lot higher. It's a great city, beautiful city. Great. And I love the fact that their mayor and everything have gotten on board with putting that community together. I can't believe you've never been there.
Well, it
doesn't work out with your schedule.
It hasn't worked out with my schedule, Will.
Gotcha. I understand. Okay, loud and clear. All right, loud and clear.
All right.
Yeah. Well, you'll get there one of these days, son. Don't worry about it. You're going to make it. I believe in you.
All right. Well, you got a lot to do. You got to get on the road and get your ass down to Houston and park yourself in Lot H.
I got a baseball game to watch. I got a game at 2:00. What are you talking about? The Twins play. Well, I gotta go, folks. We'll see you next week, and I mean see you, but it just means you're going to listen to us and not get to participate. But we'll be there on the road. Stop by and say hello if you're in the area. I'll see you on the road, my friends.
All right. Take care, everyone.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.